Hello, everyone. Both everyone who I can see and those who I can't, or for whom I can only see a small picture. So, my name is Dima. I'm the moderator for the panel, and I'm just gonna do like a short intro, and then we are gonna get right into it. So we were preparing, and we were thinking about what's actually the best structure for today and how to provide you the best value. And so far, the idea for us has been to introduce ourselves and also introduce why we chose this topic. Why are we here? In a very in all senses of the question why. With that, we wanted to introduce the opportunity. What's in there with coaching? What's actually interesting about it? Second, we would like to actually shatter all doubts about the questions of the return on investment of coaching and talk a little bit about the data and what we've sort of seen there. From there, we would then want to go into if there are any challenges currently that are in the way of adopting coaching in organizations. And then we would finish with hope, sort of the things that we are actually hoping to see, the things that we'll think change things for the better. I'll try to kind of comment the least and keep my eyes on the questions. The rest of you guys can actually focus on everyone else. But I guess there is no rule. So if you have a great idea, then just let's let it emerge. Yeah, I guess let's get started if everyone is into that. Cool. So since I'm already talking, I guess I could sort of introduce the first part and then get started with that. So we were thinking that it would be best to start with an introduction, but a bit an unusual one. So we wanted to introduce ourselves from a perspective of why we are here, why do we care, and what's our relationship with coaching, and then also end with the definition of coaching. What is coaching? How do we see coaching? Because we while preparing, we sort of face the question that maybe there are different views of it. I'll start. As said, my name is Dima. Originally, I'm from Ukraine, currently residing in Finland. I am the CEO of a startup that is trying to scale coaching, so make coaching more scalable with things like chatbots, with doing it via text. And essentially, we're trying to align the organizational goals and the individual goals and enable everyone in the organization to actually change for that matter. And why I care is because when I was a few years younger, I've experienced a huge kind of personal transformation, and I saw the power of personal development. And ever since then, it was like, wow, like there is something there. There is this huge untapped human potential. And to me, coaching is one of the most straightforward ways to actually explore that. In terms of the definition of coaching, so I'm actually referring to coaching in a very classical sense. So if you know of International Coaching Federation, where coach is not the one who is mentoring, not the one who gives advice, but the one who gives questions and guides. Sometimes a coach might give advice, but generally I've been taught to kind of refrain from that. So that's my understanding. Cool. Anyone wants to go next?
Sure, I could say hello. Thank you, Dima. My name is Kristy McCann Flynn. I am a CEO and a founder of GoCoach, which is a coach marketplace and learning platform that I created 2 years ago. The reason why I did, and it goes to my personal why, is that I'm a former HR executive for over 20 years, and I have seen way too many people leave organizations due to lack of professional development. And we have thrown out way too many people in organizations due to lack of skills. So in particular, in the US, we have a skill shortage, and I know that that's also global too. And we have a war on talent. And so the way that I've looked at it is that, coaching has been a fractured market, which we have brought together to make it affordable and accessible to everybody, and to coach in hard and soft skills. My definition of coaching is very similar to what Dima said, but it's also, something that was always there from the beginning of time. When you look at a Sherpa, that they help, unblock things for you. They help you identify things that you may have known that, that you don't know are there. And essentially the way that I look at a coach is that they really unblock and unlock your potential. And coaching has been around, since our existence, and it's here for us to continue to help each other, and unblock each other and unlock our potential together.
Matt, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. My name is Matt Thieleman. I founded a company called Bristle, and I'm a leadership coach. And my why in this lifetime is to help people to unleash their awesome on the world. I didn't mean to become a coach. Sort of like Kristy, I noticed there's a whole bunch of stuff broken in how I think we view leadership, how I think we view work. And I started speaking on it, and people asked me to coach them. And that turned into me discovering my why, which is I think that humanity has so much untapped potential that we don't really take a look at. And I'm here as a coach to help people discover that. I'm also on a 10-year mission to bring coaching to every founder, startup founder who receives VC funding. And that's because I believe that the companies that we found and fund over the next 5 years largely determine the next 50 years of humanity. So I'm really on a mission, and my secret mission is to create it so that everyone on the planet has the ability to have a coaching conversation. So when I think about coaching, I think about it as sort of a way of being that allows us to have a conversation that starts with helping the other person to have a more empowered life, a way that they can understand that they have the ability to create the life that they want. And that is a requirement of that is that they sort of accept things as they are right now, while also being open to possibility. So as a coach, we help people open to possibility and then enroll them into that possibility, stepping into it. So yeah, sort of like Dima and Kristy said, I think coaching conversations are different from consulting or advising or mentor conversations, which are really a lot more about giving answers than they are about discovering. And so as coach, my job, or any coach's job, I think, is to be curious, to really love the other person exactly where they are, and then to help them kind of step into what's next for them. So that's why I'm here, and I'm excited to talk more.
Ben, welcome.
Guys, I'm so sorry. Audio video, it's the plague of my life.
No worries. I'm going to briefly tell you where we are, and then Kristen will go next, and you will have time to digest and think of your answer. So we decided to introduce ourselves in a bit unusual way, where we would like to, maybe briefly shortly say what we do and stuff like that, but mostly focus on why are we here? So why do we care? Why are we participating? What is our relationship with coaching? And also define what do we understand by coaching, because we realized while preparing that maybe people have different definitions. So Kristen, feel free to go next, and then Ben will finish the round.
Sure. I'm Kristen Mashburn, and I'm a company culture consultant. My work is really spent around helping to build teams that are happier, healthier, and higher performing. And a big portion of that is teaching leaders how to be better coaches. So for me, coaching is more of just an everyday mindset about the way we approach everything in life. Sort of with this curiosity where we ask people questions and not give them answers. I came from a background of being an executive in a financial institution without really knowing that much about finance. And really my job was to help bring out the best in people and help their own answers kind of to come to light. So that's what I was focused on, and that's when I became more passionate about coaching. I actually am not like a classically trained coach myself, and I don't call myself a coach, but I really appreciate the work that's done in coaching. And actually, a fun fact is Matt was actually my coach. So that's how I met him. I think that answers the question. Yeah.
Cool. And Ben, you're the last one.
Okay. I love participating with these types of discussions because I like to lead by saying I'm a chemical engineer. And normally people say, what are you doing here? You're in the wrong room. So I worked in HR at a company called HireView, and we built out AI automated systems to predict job competencies and potentially downstream performance. And because of that, you learn a lot of insights into what types of behaviors perform well for different types of roles, and it also kind of goes laterally into coaching. So anything that a human would see as value or try to communicate to another individual, there are opportunities to track things, even things that feel very subjective, and there's also ways to measure success. And so coming from the AI perspective, I'm always looking for ways to amplify us, and how do you bring measurements to what we're doing. And then the other thing with AI, there's always the opportunity to amplify the good and the bad. And you've probably seen some of the bad in the media. Like there's definitely some bad applications that can be rolled out where bias and different things come in, and that's stuff that I'm familiar with. So I'm happy to be here.
What do we say is your definition of coaching, Ben?
So when I think of coaching, and I think of coaching as maybe improving or leveling up on a competency. So if there's so a lot of times I think of technical competencies. So if I was going to coach someone, I might get them to level up on being able to communicate technical terms to a lay audience, or being able to program or something more. That'd be like an actual hands-on skill set. Otherwise, I think of coaching as being some behavioral trait or competency. And so I'm definitely going to be paying attention to a lot of you guys, because I see you guys as the experts. I'm more in the AI space, or the AI land, looking for applications.
Sounds cool. So I'm actually curious, that we talked about the definitions. I feel like they're mostly connected. There are some differences, but question to everyone, and then, not everyone has to answer, but whoever feels like it. Do you think that organizations understand what coaching is? Do you think that we have a common language when we speak about coaching?
Yeah, I'll jump in now. I think that there's a lot of learning and development and coaching techniques out there, and coaching right now is not really a regulated business. But I think that people are, what's management, what's leadership, and what's coaching, and how do they all connect? And the thing is that it's an evolution. And the way you got to look as an evolution is that as we continue to evolve, we got to continue to evolve our competencies and skill sets. And there's a lot of different ways and methodologies to be able to do that, but it's really meeting people where they are. We love to force each other into org charts and hierarchies and titles and all this other stuff, but we don't look at what they really mean and how to get there. And so I think that, we gotta, lay the foundation, as to, how we further evolve as managers and leaders and as coaches to everyone. And once people see that, it starts to click, because at the end of the day, we all can be coaches, but it's how we continue to develop ourselves to be able to get there.
Cool.
I love that note that Michelle said about, I'm afraid to use the word coach within my organization. I totally get that. I was exactly the same way in the financial institution that I was in. Using that word, I don't know, it maybe had some implications, some negative implications, where I could use the word coaching and it sounded different than using the word coach. So we could have a coaching style organization, but we couldn't be coaches, if that made sense. Just the way people associated with that term, which I think highlights what you're kind of saying, Dima, is that we need to be able to define that more clearly and hopefully have some positive connotation around it, because I think it's a really great thing.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm already seeing a distinction here from what Ben brought. So my experience coaching engineers is that there's an expectation that often comes with that, and there's no harm. I mean, I say this with a ton of love, that my coach needs to sort of be a step ahead of me or have a sort of knowledge of my domain in order to be able to coach me. And so there's a distinction around coaching someone in their doing in a skill set. And the type of coaching that I really excel in that is completely distinct from that is coaching someone more in their being, which is that I don't need to know anything about their domain in order to coach them successfully, because we're working at a deeper level that's not necessarily skill related, and skills are sort of on top of it. And so what's interesting is I think both are effective, and in many conversations we could be talking about different things but not be aware of it. And so it's so important, I think, when we talk about or use any term, that we both get clear on what it is we actually mean.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. I would suggest moving on. I'm really curious to actually get to the next question, which is I expect Kristy to sort of start with, and the question is, what's the value of coaching, and can we actually prove it? Is there a return on investment? And we'll see if if the rest of us play devil's advocate, or we have other things to add, and then I think there is a smooth transition from there. So Kristy, the floor is yours.
Sure, thanks, Dima. And yeah, there's a huge ROI on coaching, and I'll actually give you some brass tacks examples of what I've lived through, and especially in my last stint within HR. I was in an organization where the average tenure was roughly around 6 months for sales people, customer success, and even engineers. And the reason it is that there are a lot of people that just didn't know how to do their job, but nobody was there to really develop them. It was more of a scorecard that everybody was working off of hitting numbers. And this led to, a lot of issues with culture, a lot of issues with engagement, and a lot of attrition, and a lot of money wasted. We just kept on rehiring and rehiring and rehiring, and there was nothing there. So I brought in leadership development training and coaching to this organization. And within 6 months, I was able to extend the 6-month tenure of the average new hire to over a year. And they stayed. The culture started to go up. Engagement started to go up. People felt empowered again because they actually knew how to do their job, and somebody was there to help them along the way. And so when I left that company, the biggest thing that I thought, I was just like, how can I give this to everybody? It's one of the reasons I left HR. I wasn't going back into another company to go through the same battle. I was going to create a company for HR, by HR, to be able to educate everybody within their organization so that they never felt left behind. And so, the data and the metrics are there, and the real life examples are there. But I think, what we're seeing right now is that everybody needs help. And there's ways to be able to do that in a very efficient and scalable way, and to meet people where they're at.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I personally did a bit of a sort of homework on this one. That was kind of like the only question where I wanted to wager in, and it's interesting. So I found out that the research sort of the meta research says that sort of meta-analysis says that generally coaching is definitely positively affecting organizations. So there's sort of a consensus that yes, it's valuable. The researchers are kind of always, of course, trying to be sort of pessimistic. There's no exact numbers of this is the ROI, but there is a few where it's either the managers asked or they actually measure it, where the ROI is sort of 5 to 7 times, so sort of 500, 700% return on investment, and that was interesting. And I went a step further, and I asked a couple of leaders that sort of I know in my network, and I was like, what do you guys think about it? What's your sort of gut feeling? And what I was surprised about is that they say, well, if nothing is on fire, I don't feel like people are really living instead of in the example Kristy gave or something, and it sort of feels like this very soft thing that you can't measure, and therefore I invest in technology because it's a lot more predictable. I can see sort of that, okay, I put this amount of money in sort of this application, and this is what I get in the output. Versus with the people, it feels more of a moral obligation. So anyone, feel free to kind of jump in. Any comments on that? Does that sort of ring true? Do you think it's Ben? Yeah.
So I'm very sensitive to the measurement side because for some types of roles, it's really easy. My favorite one would be a call center. So if I'm trying to coach someone at a call center, there's metrics attached to them: first call resolution, customer feedback, things like that. And in sales, potentially can be cleaner too, because there's did they hit the quota? Were we able to retain them? But then you get into other roles like engineering, or healthcare. It become a lot of times they just don't have very good metrics. So we can have a conversation around what the metrics should be, bedside manner and different things. But the reality is they don't have those metrics. They don't track that. And so for some roles, I think the metrics are there where you can have that accountability. In other roles, it feels more touchy-feely, where the people that advocates for coaching would say this makes sense, but you have to get creative on how you're going to track that or measure it.
I think what's interesting about that too is most of the, outside paid coaching that's happening is going to senior executives and not to those people who are at those levels that are so easy to measure. And if more emphasis was placed on making that equitable for everyone, I think the results would become a little bit clearer.
Makes sense. And do you guys think that what's the current sort of challenge? Do the leaders see the data? Do they think that is that more of a cultural question, or is it more of a return on investment question in your opinion, in terms of the adoption of coaching?
In my experience in companies, it really depends on the culture. And there's companies that are bottom line driven, and they're not going to really look at coaching as a benefit, and something that people need, and they see it as a perk and as an extra cost. But when you do the math, it costs, close to, $100,000 to rehire someone when you could coach somebody for roughly $5,000 a year, and they stay and you get that return. I think there's other cultures that are embracing it because, we have this huge workforce of millennials that are going to be the majority of the workforce, and they still don't have the skills. I mean, you guys have to remember going to your first job, 2 or 3, did you have any idea what you're doing? How to navigate, from being a new hire to being, a new manager, and there's a lot of gap areas, especially with companies changing and evolving. And so I think that companies are really seeing that we got to get ahead of change and be more proactive rather than reactive. But it depends on the company and the culture, and it really depends on an extremely powerful HR advocate too.
I like Kristen's call out for coaching's happening at the higher levels, because that's what I've seen too, where executives will have someone riding shotgun as almost like a life coach or an executive coach, because the mental stress, the load, the stuff they're dealing with, their mental health, but also the damages that can be caused. So I think we all agree there's a lot of value down low in the org, but if an executive burns out or there's damage, like that damage can be catastrophic. And so I think for the board to approve coaching at the executive level, it seems a little bit more obvious, where I think everyone on this call would agree, no, there's value across the whole chain, but I like that you called that out.
Cool.
So
Matt,
yeah, so you'll notice that I didn't chime in at all when we're talking about data, because at some level, I believe that data in making decisions is arguably useless, right? So if anyone here is a fan of Simon Sinek, his assertion is that our why is trapped in our non-lingual part of our brain, non-verbal part of our brain, right? And so what I find is there's a ton of fear when we're approached with the idea of it's a couple of things. One, receiving coaching or getting coached, because we then have to look at all the parts of ourselves we don't want to look at, so that it's scary. And when we're faced with transformational change, it's really scary because it's new. And then secondly, when we think about doing that in our organization, we weren't really taught these skills when we were growing up. So it's really easy, as Dima mentioned, we can point to technology and say, I can measure that, that's really easy. But when it's something that's brand new and I can't guarantee it'll work, I'm confronted with uncertainty. So I have to confront that fear. And if I'm not used to doing that, or I'm not willing to do that, I'm not going to even touch it. So I think one of the things that we have to talk about anytime we're talking about coaching, or anytime we're talking about sort of something that has to do with at the mental level or at a higher level, we have to acknowledge that fear is present, and that stepping through the fears are a requirement to even transform.
Makes sense. Yeah. Kristen, Kristy, any comments on that?
I mean, go ahead, Kristen.
No, I mean, I pretty much assert everything that says about that, so I don't think there's any use in me expounding on it.
Yeah.
So I guess a more constructive question then is, how, what can we do when we are sort of selling this change, when we are selling coaching? So the name of the session is, coaching transforming organizations. How do you, I don't know if convince is the right word, but sort of show someone why that is the case?
I feel like I have a really strong opinion about this, but it's having them be coached themselves, being in that situation where they submit to the coaching practice. And if they do, they will quickly learn, I think, how helpful it can be to them personally. And that will help them to understand the same for everyone else. I mean, it depends on what level of coaching we're talking about. At the upper level, a lot of times we talk about like this leadership coaching, sort of the live coaching thing. I think someone alluded to, like this element, and we understand that importance. When we get to the lower levels, sometimes we say that even say the people in the upper levels of the organization don't need coaching around specific elements of what they do. So they keep it so high that they don't see the value for other people within the organization. So I think it's important to help point where it makes sense for a contact center, or it makes sense for, someone who's in a customer service role or a sales role, or those sorts of things.
Who wants to go next?
Let me mention real quick, I think there's a lot of people talking about what's the difference between coaching, mentoring, and advising over here in the chat. That maybe we should just hit that up while we're talking through this a little bit, just so everybody's on the same page. Does anybody want to take that?
I'm afraid we're not going to end up on the same page, just because they're going to be different definitions. But as we touched upon that, I would say my view on that hopefully will sort of not defend anyone, is that there is an organization called International Coaching Federation. It has the most it certifies coaches, and it's the organization that probably has the most certified coaches in the world, and is sort of held as one of the biggest standards. So they define coaching as sort of different from mentoring, and different business coaching specifically as different from mentoring, different from advising. So in their courses, you sort of learn not to give advice. On the other hand, there is a book which is called $1 Billion Coach, about Bill Campbell, from Silicon Valley, who was coaching Steve Jobs and the likes, and the Google guys, and he's called The Coach. And I kind of opened the book and I read it, and I'm like, whoa, this is like very far from the classical definition of coaching. He's just a people person. He was very friendly. he was very empathetic. He always sort of talked to everyone. He saw different points of view. So that's complex answer from my side, I guess.
I would definitely agree with that, but I think I agree with the ICF, and have read that book, but it really comes down to economics. Mentors aren't paid. Coaches are. And if you're a paid coach, you better be bringing value to someone, and really pushing out what is the growth mindset, because that's something that the ICF is always making a distinction about. Is, are you in a fixed mindset? Where it's this way and it's always going to be this way, and you're not going to look at different potentials and different opportunities and different experiences and really understand what that value may be short and long term. Or are you in a growth mindset where you're open to a lot of different, opportunities, as you further grow and evolve. And so, I think the other thing is that, with mentors, those are more, in my mind, organizational Sherpas, like somebody that's already in the organization in a department or in a role that you aspire to be in. And so there can be a lot of tactical knowledge there, and practical knowledge, rather than a lot of the development, of the work of yourself that goes into coaching.
I think just to piggyback on that a little bit, Kristy, I think that's when people say, well, how can someone within an organization be a coach that's really more of a mentor. And I think there's sort of this style of being a leader where you allow people to know the answers like within themselves, understanding that they have the power to know what the answer is and not having to necessarily tell them the way that they should do something, but to help them to find their way to the answer. Does that make sense? I think that can be done within an organization as well as mentorships, which I also think is an important thing that happens within organizations. So it can go kind of both ways. So I think part of what we were saying, if not everybody tuned in for the whole thing, is some of the issues are about talking about coaching is that it is not clearly defined and maybe the way we all like for it to be.
Yeah, I'll totally jump on that. I think there's like a risk to try to make something right or wrong, or to clearly define it and to not deal with the uncertainty of it. And that sort of eliminates the fact that some people are really good at offering sort of stories and advice in a way, and that's their sort of coaching style, and that's really beneficial for one person, when another person or coach is really good at using something like metaphors or questions or really being curious or using play, and that's what someone needs. And so I think the more we can not have to identify a very strict role of, my profession is coach, and Kristen is a natural coaching sort of leader when she was managing and leading teams. And we can both come from the same place, which is being curious, opening people to possibility, and empowering them to kind of live into what they want. Like that is role agnostic. And so I think, especially given our title here, how we can transform using coaching to transform our organization, I'm a yes to every organization hiring coaches, because I think that will help the world. And I'm a yes to every organization having coaching literally at every aspect of it, in every role, no matter where they are, and coming from that place and being able to come from that place. So I think if we try to put people in very specific places, we run the danger of losing the higher level picture.
Cool. There was actually one of the questions on or the discussion about the manager as a coach. I'm actually curious if you guys have any experience with that. So when the managers receive coaching education and then they coach their own team members, do you think that works?
It's a pay it forward philosophy. You know what I mean? It's you keep on coaching and developing people, and they're going to be able to keep on coaching and developing other people. And so, I think that's the goal is you want to be able to develop people so that they do have that culture of learning and they do have that coach mindset, especially when they're managing, they're leading their teams. And I think that there's an art and a gift to it a lot of times. And it's really about how one sees themselves today and where they want to get tomorrow, and it's the how that's attached to it. We all can do jobs and do certain things, but it's how we do it that really inspires somebody to be able to get to that next step. And so I think that's at least my sole goal is to make sure that we are arming people to be the coaches of today and tomorrow, so that we can continue on. Because as Matt said earlier, the organizations that are getting created today are going to be the behemoths 50 years from now, and we want to be able to protect that and engage it and develop it along the way.
I think we're going to see that happening more and more in organizations. As we have more certified coaches that are outside of the organization, naturally, these people are going to become better coaches, and this is just going to be a way of life for them. So when my sister calls me and tells me she has a problem, I treat it as if, okay, give her the space, let her talk, be curious about this. Let's talk about what, a practice that she's going through. And I am not a coach. I just understand some of the philosophies around that. And that's what makes me show up that way in really any way that I am interacting with people.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's not only helpful, it's actually a requirement for companies to succeed in the future. As robots take our jobs, we need to lean into what we're good at as humans, and that's at connection and curiosity and creativity. And having a coach sort of framework or mindset creates that. I actually do coaching training for managers at organizations. And one of the things I find, and a lot in the chat, people are talking about the issues of promoting managers and seeing them struggle, is that we tell someone you're a manager now, you need to go coach and lead, but they never get practice on how. And so my other perspective is we actually have to create coaching training that gets people in the practice of having coaching conversations, or else we like give them a one-page document, or we have them go watch a video and we're like, go try it out now. No, we need to get them in the practice of it, getting feedback so they can figure out where they're falling down and where they're actually good at it. And so I think that's so important going forward.
And I actually think that links to one of the questions in the discussions of maybe Matt, you can answer as well, of like, what do you think about formal certification programs, and which programs or curriculum have you found the most valuable?
Yeah, that's an interesting question for me, because I actually chose not to get certified as a coach. So I was about to be enrolled in a certification and chose the training I did. It's actually called the Samurai Coaching Dojo, which is a wild name, because it had exactly that deliberate practice that I'm talking about. So I'm for certification. Absolutely, yes. I think it's important. And more than that, I'm for being trained on the being of coach, on being trained on and actually getting practice. So if there's a certification where you can go and get certified and you get a diploma in a weekend and you never actually have to coach anyone and all you do is read a book, it's probably not useful, because the point is not the certification. The point is to actually be good at it and to provide value. So any certification, I say, make sure that that's your requirement. And I'm open to what everyone else says too. I don't need to be the final word on that by any means.
I am a big advocate of the certification, and it's not because of the certification and the cost and whatever it is with ICF, IPAC, CTI, because it's expensive. I mean, it's not cheap. But when we were bringing coaches onto our platform at GoCoach, we had a lot of coaches that were certified, but then we also had a lot of people that were in a career transition themselves, where they're former executives, former leaders, and they were really good at what they have done, and they wanted to work with individuals to continue to help unlock and unblock them. And so we actually partnered with the local ICF to be able to provide coaching certification for those individuals that were new going into coaching, but they had the skills. So similar to what you're saying, Matt, like they definitely had the skills, but we're giving them the actual certification, because when you go through that certification course, there's just so many different methods and technologies and techniques. And don't forget, the coaches are learning too. And that's, you want to be upskilling your coaches so that they're upskilling, a lot of the different things, within the world of work and the future of work. And so, it's one of the reasons that we've made this a double-sided platform. We are education through and through it. And if we're going to have the best coaches out there helping, to make us the best that we need to be, we got to be skilling and certifying them too. And education never ends. It's limitless. And that's what we're looking to do.
Cool, makes sense. I would love to come back a bit to the question that we started with before we sort of jumped off to the audience questions, because I think it's really important, and then we could sort of come back to that. So the question was, how do we actually show the value, and how do we actually get the people on board, especially I guess the decision makers usually, but not only. And I like the Kristen's answer of like you first actually coach them and show them the value. I guess the executives in this regard. Any other comments on that? Do you find that the value is easy to represent, or have you struggled with it yourself?
I'll use a dicey topic right now. We're going through the coronavirus, right? A lot of organizations are freaking out. A lot of countries are freaking out, and we're shutting down borders and doing all these things in a reactive way. There's not a lot of education out there, and development for people to look at this in a proactive way, as to how we could be using this to a silver lining, to Matt's point, use the technology and start to lean into our creativity and innovation to be able to work and help each other without having to be right there, similar to what we're doing with this virtual conference. And if we're always, working in panic mode, it's going to be even that harder to get ahead. And I think that, the way to really get buy-in from, your organization on, doing the coaching is, what type of company do you want to be 5 years from now? Do you want to be that's one that's in reaction mode? That's constantly dealing with the same problems, or do you want to be one that's in an aspirational mode? You know what I mean? And moving ahead and setting the path for others to be able to follow and find. And so I think that there's a lot of value to what it can be, but I also think that there's a lot of value to applying it in our current state of how we all, work and get through things together. So sorry, a little off topic with the virus, but I think it's important because, HR leaders are under pressure right now and they don't have answers. And, we need to be able to coach and develop people through.
Very true. I actually, does anyone have any comments? Or I love one comment one question from the audience actually, which is sort of related to this. Is sort of or there's two, so I'll try to combine them. So which transformations in your opinion are the most needed today, and if you've had any examples of how these transformations actually happened in your experience due to coaching?
I'll hop in first. There are two that come to mind. I'm actually really excited to hear what Ben says. So I want Ben in the land of AI to help to hop on this too. So the first one that I see is just this transformation toward this new sort of leadership style, which is transformational leadership, which is empowering people to create new possibility in their company, right? Which is very different from top-down management that we've seen, especially since the 80s, pretty much enacted everywhere across companies, right? And so that's a fundamental shift, and lots of stuff is going to have to break in order to make that happen. But I think it's so important for any companies to succeed as technology expands so quickly. The second one I think is super important for humanity is for us to rethink what is work actually for. So right now we have a system that's built on, we make a bunch of money so that we can keep making more money so that we can keep making more money, which means we treat people as sort of as cogs in the system and we run them down, and we have this culture that says you need to work and work and work and work. So I think there's a huge opportunity for transformation and rethinking, what are we actually living for? What are we working for? And what's the point of this in the first place? And having companies and organizations start from that level, saying, what would it be like to actually create a company that beautifies the world, that allows people to have more sort of freedom and autonomy and leadership, to create technology that's used for good, et cetera. So those are the two things that I see as huge opportunities. And coaching is just at the core of that. I don't have an example of me creating that in an organization right now. I mean, I think it's a part of all of it, but that's what I see for the next 10, 15, 20 years.
So I've got some thoughts when Matt was talking. And so when I think about AI, I think about amplification of work or what can be done. So if I think of let's think sales. So very specific. I've got a sales role. I might bring in some external coaches to help me that have coached other sales teams to kind of identify the behaviors or the processes that happen. And having been a manager myself, sometimes we drown in urgency. Like we're completely drowning in urgency, and that's why coaching is so valuable, to kind of give us a breath of fresh air, but give us a sane mind to kind of come in and say, no, this is the process. And I think where AI can be pretty exciting, potentially transformational for an organization, even the best human coaching it's a good start. It's not garbage, but it's also maybe not perfect. It's a good start in the right direction. Now imagine a scenario where I have 1,000 sales reps and I've recorded every single pitch they've ever given to every prospect. I know the sales numbers, I know who's done well. Potentially I can use AI to rank every single sales pitch ever. I don't have enough time to review all of them, and my sales team doesn't have enough time. But if I can bring that sales coach in, and now we are reviewing, these are the 20 most compelling pitches. And it's not because they closed or didn't close, it's because AI is finding a pattern. The beautiful thing that could come out of that is we could discover something that is kind of an oddity, something very strange. It was actually think of it as like a random mutation in the wild. This is human behavior. You're pitching a custom product in a strange environment, and you did something. You had some type of engagement during the pitch, and enough of a pattern was surfaced. Now the coach can react to it, but there was no way the coach could have suggested that. There's no way a human could have known that until it kind of surfaced up. So that's an example I was thinking of where AI could potentially offer some transformational spin, but it's always AI plus human. So AI plus the coaching perspective, what could you do?
A quick note on that with sort of AI, just as a follow-up. So a lot of our clients that we work with, and we provide this sort of scalable coaching solution. So a lot of them talk about how can we enable digitalization with coaching, where they say that, okay, the rolling out the new program, the new AI, the new Microsoft Teams is the easy part. The difficult part is all the conflicts that emerge once you change something little in an organization of 10,000 people, 100,000 people. So that's just a quick note on that.
Well, a good coaching technique, I mean, we talk about any type of transformation, like I think like 9 out of 10 companies right now are going through a digital transformation, right? And so you got to look at the change management, aspects of it. And there is a great model out there called ProSci, you know what I mean? Because like to your point, Dima, like you've tweaked something or changed something and somebody notices, and then they have to figure out how they're going to do their job tomorrow. That is now different. You know what I mean? It's like if you ask somebody to now write with their left hand, it's going to be much slower, especially if they're not a lefty, and it's going to be much more painful. And guess what? They're not going to want to do it. You know what I mean? But we need to have a lot of, coaching and change management practices involved now to be able to drive the awareness of what we need to do and why we need to change. You know what I mean? So that essentially builds to the desire and the ability and the agility and the reinforcement to actually get to that transformation, to actually get to that change, to actually get the individual comfortable with the new and different roles that they may be playing, and that confidence, right? And so, a lot of times when it comes to, any type of digital transformation, it's yeah, sure, it's digital, but it's basic change management 101. And the only way that you're going to get people to change is to further evolve them and to be able to show them that why, and to be able to reinforce that. And so I agree, I mean, there's a lot that AI and, different things can help with that. But I think that we don't, as a species and even as companies, even understand the basics of change management. We just see that what we want to do, and we don't put a lot of time and effort in how we get there. And I think that we need to put a lot more time and effort how we get there so that we can actually do what we want to be able to do. And a lot of people are going to be able to do that. AI can definitely help, but you're going to need to be able to really get the conviction of the people behind it.
Kristen,
I'd love to be able to add. Yeah, I'd love to be able to add something to that question, because I think it's a good question. To me, at the heart of most of the issues in any relationship, including what happens at the office, comes down to communication and poor communication. And coaching is a massive tool to improve communication throughout your organization if you can enroll all of your leaders in being coaches with their employees. And that's something when I was at the financial institution that I was at before, that was a big part of my work, was helping managers to be able to coach better with their teams. And so things like, just to give you something tangible, so this doesn't all sound like up here, using something like one-on-one meetings, like 10-minute one-on-one weekly meetings, sitting down, having real conversations with people, asking them how their work is, asking them, how they feel that day, all those sorts of things that we pay outside coaches to do, which is not a bad thing. I love that. But it also needs to be done within organizations. And when you do it, it's powerful how that can trickle down from senior leaders to the rest of the organization. So that's something that I've experienced and appreciated, seeing that to kind of come to fruition. And I hope we can see that, in more and more organizations as we all become more aware of the benefits of coaching.
Cool. Considering that we are getting a bit closer to the end of the session, and there might be other questions from the audience, I want to sort of do this one that sort of would be good to cover nonetheless. And the question is, what is coming up? What solutions are you excited about? What actions should HR and professionals take? Sort of what's on the horizon? What's the future? What's the hope for that future? So many questions, but feel free to kind of like phrase it how you feel like. And I guess this is for everyone.
I'm really excited about the future of HR and the next generation of HR leaders. To be quite honest, HR has evolved, from personnel to, an HR manager to a business partner, to having a seat at the table. And the reason I think it's important is, one, I'm biased. I'm a former HR leader, and that's always going to be in my heart. I still laugh at the fact I'm an entrepreneur. I'm always going to be HR. And the reason that I chose HR is because I always wanted to be able to help and develop people. And, we're not be bogged down with pointless tasks and administrative stuff and, AI, you could take that all away. If I can just be able to focus on my business and focus on my people and to be that trusted advisor to the CEO and to really play, that role. I'm a Game of Thrones fan and, I really see the CHRO as the hand to the CEO. I think that is a great relationship that also leads to a lot of different coaching and development within an organization, because that HR person is now seen as that hand rather than, all the different things and names that we have been called over the years. And that's where I'm done. And so I'm excited to see the future of work and love the fact that what Enrique is doing with this conference to really see what the future of HR is going to be, because I think it's going to be on us because we're in it for the people and we're in it to make it right. And we're in there for the development. And so, hats off. I'm very excited to see what we're all going to do.
I'll piggyback kind of off of what Kristy said, because I think this idea of the future generation of work and the future, like more modern workforce, I think we're seeing, and studies are showing us, I don't know if you guys have read, It's the Manager. It's a Gallup poll book. And one of the things that it points out is just how the dynamics of the workforce really are changing. Like, for example, going from the mentality of my paycheck to my passion, focus more around passion and doing and, being there for people, but also the idea of going from my boss to my coach. I mean, that is what our future generations are wanting to see. And as they're asking for it, we're going to have to be there and giving that to them. I've sat with many managers who've said to me, they're just looking for more feedback than I'm willing to give, or they're just looking for more attention than anyone else ever has, those kinds of things. And I always turn that back around to say, your employees, as a manager, your employees are your customers. So if that's what the customers are demanding, that's what you need to be supplying. And I'm glad that the future generation is demanding this, because I think it's building a stronger organization, one built less out of fear and those sorts of things, but really more of full communication and openness so that you can do your best work together. So I'm excited about that.
You're hitting the servant leadership model. I think that if we continue to put in place a lot of servant leadership models, there's going to be a hell of a lot less Adam Newmans and Travis Kalanick's and all those other people that were not in that space, and that hurt a lot of people. The best thing about the millennial generation, which I'll also give a hats off to, is that they're saying what we should have said years ago. Enough is enough. We want to be able to work and live and be human, and that they are saying it and we are delivering on it, and it's really going to help change the face of the workforce and for us to further evolve.
You want to go?
Matt, Ben, what are you excited about?
Ben, yeah, go for it. I saw you're going to chime in.
Oh, so I always like to turn things way up into the future. So where we're going to be 5-10 years from now. Job simulation is huge in HR because questions are becoming more real world. Can we simulate the job? Imagine in coaching, you could actually have coaching simulations. So you can imagine in an extreme future, you're doing a VR simulation, you're coaching through a prospect. Not really science fiction. We have the fundamentals today to pull this off. And AI can pull things out of you besides just your visual behavior and your audio cues, potentially your heart rate, your blood flow. Are you getting exasperated? How's it going? And there's a process to scale that very well and also fix the gap between the educational system. Because I'd argue our educational system is not preparing us for the workforce when it comes to communications and peer-to-peer interactions. So there could be a future where our kids and our children, our grandchildren are better prepared through virtual simulations where they hit the ground running. So.
I love this. So I'm gonna, where Ben is like way in the future and way technology, I'm gonna go way analog. What I am most excited about is, first of all, that we have more than 100 people tuning into this conversation today. And what that means to me is that more than 100 people, right when they hang up, can go talk to someone else, look them in the eye and ask them how their day is. They can go find a book on coaching. They can go ask someone who needs their help, how they can support them. And that's really exciting to me, right? So we have amazing technology and each of us has a choice right now, especially from education, like with our kids up to any level, to decide to start taking this on. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also really excited about the fact that in the last month, Gallup has found that employee engagement is actually at the highest level than it has been in recent history, which is still disappointing to me, but it starts to show that this stuff is working. So the other thing that I'm excited about is we have more than 100 people now who can make a phone call to a coach to either coach them one-on-one or to bring them into their organization and to start being the change they want to see. That's really exciting. It's all the people already engaged who, when they take the next step, more people will take the next step.
Cool. So I think, before we abruptly sort of interrupted, I just want to say thank you everyone, first of all, everyone on the panel, but also everyone joining. I think it actually did feel like a conversation and there was a lot of interaction with the audience, which I personally loved. I think like how we could use like the last 3 minutes is first of all, by the way, like I think we can sort of quickly, those of us who are open to networking, for example, like I would be open to connect on LinkedIn with people who are interested to discuss this further, so we can sort of put our notes down. But for the last 3 minutes, feel free to guys like pick a question that you find interesting in the comments above. There were like a bunch of like maybe 3, 4, 5, and answer that. So kind of like randomly.
There is a question that kept on popping up about group coaching that I think is important to answer. And so group coaching, individual coaching, the great thing about it is that it's personalized education, right? And so like it's everybody fits all model instead of a one size fits all model. Personally, I know that I learned the best with that one-on-one interaction, and probably why our education system, Ben, is where it is right now. And it's going to continue to be problematic. But I do think that there's a lot of people that benefit based on their personality style to that group coaching methodology also. And so I really think it comes down to the individual, the way that they learn and their personality style. But the best way to find out is by asking them, you know what I mean? And, knowing that we have all these different tools, asking and you'll be able to provide it.
Maybe this hits on what Matt said with fear, but I know vulnerability is a new sexy topic that people are talking about. So is that related to that, Matt? Like the vulnerability of kind of opening up to, potentially get feedback, or maybe it's not even related to your fear comment that you had earlier, but I've seen a lot of people talking about vulnerability lately.
Yeah, Brene Brown, everyone read her if you haven't, like props to her. It's like I can't give you one answer. Yes, acknowledging fear generally feels vulnerable. And I would assert there's a way that we're like making vulnerability really sexy, and like every leader needs to be vulnerable in a way that doesn't actually create what we want. So my perspective is that when we're confronted with possibility, we're also confronted with fear. And we do need to acknowledge that and put it on the table and then work from there. So that requires vulnerability, but vulnerability is not the point either.
One more thing for the people who still might not have heard about it, and by the way, like the thing I'm excited about for the future is the Thiel sort of movement that started from the book called Reinventing Organizations. So Kristy talked about servant leadership. I'm looking into no leadership. That's a really interesting concept to me. So if there is sort of self-management and people can actually do the work on their own. And there's a really interesting example, an organization called Buurtzorg, which has 12,000 employees and 30 people in the back office. That's it. The rest are managing themselves. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
all.
you.
Thanks, everyone. Great meeting you.
Bye.